For those of you who've been following me know that I like to cover the hip hop scene every once in a while. And like that dude right here is the prime example of being an idiot. I mean, like I've always said this. Like you try to get away from the area where you grew up in. You make music and content about it, and then in the end, you get popped for something you've been trying to get away from. Because now, with their money and influence, they use it for bad purposes, which is just, yeah, idiotic. So, like, in the end, you reap what you sow. Like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on notification. Let's get right into it.
A Grammy Award winning rapper's fate lies on the outcome of his high profile murder for hire case. But before the case is brought in front of a jury, his attorney is sounding the alarm, claiming his rights have been violated because of a smart.
All right, like the state usually violates their rights. I mean, they're not treating murder suspects lightly, or like murder for hire suspect, whatever. Yeah, they keep you in there for a long time, like as long as they can.
Tool. This is Inside the Crime presented by Law and Crime. I'm Elizabeth Milner.
Let's go.
Federal prosecutors say Lil Durk is the mastermind of a sinister plot that ended in murder. While he should be prepping for the fight of his life, his defense attorneys say that the last 4 months he's been in isolation, and prison officials are giving conflicting reasons on why. It's October 17, 2024. We're in South Florida, near Miami International Airport, when suddenly federal agents swarm to arrest rapper Durk Banks, known better to his fans as Lil Durk. Federal agents got worried when multiple flights were booked under his name, one to Dubai, one to Switzerland, and one to Italy.
Even
They believed
Switzerland,
he might have been trying to make a run for it, but
even Switzerland, like that boy was even right there.
he never made it to boarding. When news came down of his arrest, it was shocking. His face and his mugshot were everywhere. The headlines reading, a Grammy Award winning rapper accused of being the mastermind and orchestrator of a murder for hire plot to take out a rival. There's so many layers to this case that some already know. But to scratch the surface of this case, here's some quick background. Back in 2020, Dirk's best
You
friend and
had
collaborator
everything.
King Von was gunned down outside of an Atlanta, Georgia nightclub. On that night, King Von and rapper Quando Rondo got into a fight. Although Quando wasn't accused of killing King
That
Von,
dude's
Quando's
in every
friend
story.
was accused of shooting at him, with one of the bullets fatally striking King Von. And if you believe the prosecution's version of events, Lil Durk wanted revenge, but he wanted to take it out on Quando Rondo. By August of 2022, the alleged plan was already in motion. Durk's alleged associates learned Quando was staying at an LA hotel. They flew from Chicago to San Diego, then drove to LA using money allegedly provided by Durk. Federal prosecutors even alleging Durk had one specific instruction: don't book no flights under no names involved with me. The killers were provided with hotel rooms, ski masks, luxury
Yeah.
sedans, and weapons. The men, not including Durk, followed Quando, who was with his cousin, to an LA gas station. Then bullets flew. Prosecutors say while the intended target wasn't killed, his cousin was. Afterwards, the
Damn.
suspects went to an In-N-Out to discuss payment before flying home to Chicago. Durk, through his attorney, has denied he was this criminal mastermind who ordered out a hit on Quando. By November 14th of 2024, he pleaded not guilty to his federal charges, which include conspiracy, use of interstate facilities to commit murder for hire resulting in death, using, carrying, and discharging firearms in a machine gun, plus possession of.
Look, that's what you get for still lurking around in those areas, like it with the same folks. That's what you get, like for real.
Such firearms in furtherance of a crime of violence. Now, while Durk wasn't accused of pulling the trigger, he's still facing a lot of years in prison if he's convicted. While federal prosecutors took the death penalty off the table, Durk and his co-defendants could face a statutory max sentence of life in prison. Again, only if convicted. The case was first slated for trial last January. Then it got pushed and pushed and pushed again. However, as I'm recording this, the trial is on the calendar set to begin in April. Durk's attorneys have filed a series of motions since he's been behind bars. Of course, they filed a motion to dismiss.
That's exactly what they're doing with those people, with those rappers. When YNW Melly, exactly the same. They they will showcase to the world that it's not to be reckoned with. Like, do not mess with murder. It's and They have every financial resource, they have every ability to get away, and they're still promoting violence, bad stuff to the younger generation. Not everybody. I mean, like, yeah, sure, you rap about where you come from and what happens to you, and sure, but if you're still promoting that, and like some of these are totally are. What is that? It's not, and they throw around those gang signs all the time, and like they mess with these kind of stuff, and like this that new generation is much more involved in that lifestyle, or like still is even after like getting away from it. 50 Cent, Ice Cube, a lot of these rappers didn't touch where they come from. Like they didn't go back because why would they? Why would they?
The indictment as the defense cited false and or misleading grand jury evidence. That was denied. The defense filed a motion for his detention to be reconsidered. That was also denied. In the latest
Yeah,
court filing, his defense
fair,
requested a status hearing because Lil Durk's been in the
absolutely
SHU for
fair.
4.5 months. This is what his attorney Christy O'Connor wrote in the latest filing. Since August 29, 2025, Mr. Banks has been confined to the segregated housing unit at the Metropolitan Detention Center. In the SHU, Mr. Banks is confined to a very small jail cell, just large enough for a single bed, a toilet, and a sink for 23 hours a day. He does not have access to commissary. He is permitted one phone call a month and no in person social visits. The original cause of his SHU placement was an allegation that he was in possession of an unauthorized Apple Watch. Since August 29, 2025, Mr. Banks has not received the process that is prescribed by law where an inmate is accused of an infraction. Mr. Banks' defense team has received conflicting explanations for his extended SHU detention without process. For example, in October, an attorney for MDC told us that Mr. Banks' high profile / celebrity status is not the cause of his SHU detention. Then on December 22nd, the warden represented to us that Mr. Banks' presence in the general population poses a threat to
Yeah,
the security
contradict me.
and orderly running
As
of the institution
so
due to the high profile nature of Mr. Banks' pending
the
criminal
story is
case and
bullshit.
possible violation of BOP's disciplinary program. This is despite Mr. Banks' 11-month presence in the general population prior to August 29th, without
Okay.
any incident whatsoever caused by his celebrity status or the high profile nature of his case. The filing goes on to say, in response to our inquiries, the government has provided us with an internally inconsistent explanation for Mr. Banks' extended SHU detention. On one hand, the government tells us Mr.
All right.
Banks' continued placement in the SHU is not based on the FBI's investigation or the USO's charging decision regarding the Apple Watch. On the other hand, the government tells us that the BOP is waiting to institute disciplinary proceedings related to the Apple Watches based on our charging.
I mean, like, yeah, he tried to contact the outside world. I mean, like, that's why they're really keeping it down for him to not communicate with anybody. These people are so often like murder for hire cases, RICO cases. These people have a network, or like they're accused of having a network. And as soon as you're accused of having a network, good night. That's a terrorist status.
Decision. Both of these statements cannot be true. Either the process to which Mr. Banks is entitled has been delayed and his stay extended due to the government's ongoing investigation, or it has not. Durk's attorney cited an article from the American Public Health Association called The Psychological Distress in Solitary Confinement, Symptoms,
Yeah,
Severity, and Prevalence in the United
I mean,
States. The scientific study reveals psychological
I couldn't imagine being locked up 23 hours a day. I couldn't. And especially in that room which they described. Stay out of jail, boys. Do yourself and everybody that you love and everybody that loves you, do them a favor and stay out of that miserable hellhole.
effects of inmates after being in the SHU. Symptoms including clinically significant symptoms of depression, anxiety, or guilt, disproportionately high rates of serious mental illness and self-harming behavior, and social
Fair.
isolation, loss of identity, and sensory hypersensitivity. So citing these examples, Durk's defense is concerned about him being in solitary confinement because the longer he's in there, it could be violating his Eighth Amendment right, the one that prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. A hearing was set on the matter for January 7th. Criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson Ferreira joins us on Inside the Crime now. And Safa, four and
That
a
was
half
yesterday.
months is a long time for solitary confinement.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to what Lil Durk's defense attorneys are alleging?
His attorneys, what they're alleging is essentially that he's been in there for a significant amount of time. And unfortunately, as a result of that, there's a diminished capacity in terms of his mental health and things like that, because we know, traditionally speaking, the more that somebody is isolated, and particularly in solitary confinement, it can have a significant impact on their mental health. It can trigger depression, anxiety, all sorts of things. And so I think his team is doing the right thing by highlighting this and making the court aware of this. The basis for them bringing this to the court's attention, I think, is some discrepancy with what the jail, or I think it's MDC, has communicated, which was either this is as a result of an Apple Watch violation or his status as a celebrity in the institution. And his attorneys have gotten both explanations as to why he's been in solitary so long. And it's not very clear as to how long he's expected to be there, and if the appropriate administrative proceedings have taken place so that he can ultimately be released from that status.
And does any part of
I mean, like, as long as he doesn't cause any other problems, right? But they clearly highlighted his ability to communicate through channels, through certain channels. So, yeah, good luck.
you think that this is punishment because of his celebrity status, or do you really think that it's possibly the Apple Watch that has him in the shoe?
I think if this was only about the Apple Watch, that certainly could have put him in the shoe. It would likely be considered contraband. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, how long is he expected to remain there? Sometimes we see 30 days. Sometimes there are other mechanisms that the prison institutions do use in order to mitigate or have some sort of culpability and responsibility when an individual does violate their code of conduct and things of that nature. So I think 4 months, if it is about an Apple Watch, is
It's a long
absolutely
time.
extreme.
Gotta
I
admit
think the
that.
other end of this is he is a celebrity, and not only that, but he's a unique individual in the sense that he's alleged to be tied to gang relation, or he's alleged to be gang related. And so when you see
The minute you,
individuals or clients like that in institutions,
the minute they can make it look like you're tied to a network of dangerous individuals who are able to like give orders, take out orders. You know what I mean? The second that fact is being portrayed, you're done. They can isolate you completely, and that's what they're doing right there. They're isolating him. And the prosecutors on that case, they have the ability. They do have the ability to stop this or like make it easier, but they don't want to. Why would they?
they're a little bit more selective with where they are placed, and sometimes they have to keep them away from other individuals. So it's not clear the actual reason as to why, but we know his attorneys have highlighted the things that at least have been told to them. And now this is the accountability factor for the Bureau of
He looks
Prisons and
like
for
Jay-Z.
MDC to actually say and explain why Mr. Durk, or Lil Durk, has ultimately been held this long.
And we're learning that Dirk's trial is supposed to begin in April. There's always that possibility it could be pushed back again, but we'll see. But it's supposed to begin in April. But how difficult is it for a client to prep for a trial if they are in the shoe for such a long period of time? His defense attorney is also citing, to your point during our first question, about how much of a psychological damage that can really happen to inmates who are in solitary confinement, especially for a prolonged period of time.
It's extremely difficult. And usually, as defense attorneys, we always like and we love when we can prepare our cases with our clients out of custody, when they're able to come to our offices and we can watch footage together, speak to investigators together, our own investigators, I should
Yeah,
say. It
it's
always
not
makes it
possible with
easier
that one.
for us to
Gotta
defend the
work
case
around
that
that
way.
fact.
It can be
That's
a little
stupid.
difficult
That's just
logistically
stupid.
to take in certain things into
Now they're
the
making look.
facility. The prisons ultimately have their own rules.
They make it look like how every aspect of his of his rights are being violated. Like there's a reason why he's in there. Don't get it twisted, woman.
to what can come in, what can come out. Sometimes I might bring in a computer, what you can leave, what you can copy, what you can print. It just makes it so tedious and a bit more difficult in addressing these things with our client, as opposed to if they were
but
on
not
custody. And
impossible.
certainly him being in the shoe gives an added layer to that, because we've got to also deal with his unique situation of being in the shoe and what that has done to him mentally. And what we also know, and it's very clear, is that a person has to have the ability to participate in their defense, and they have to be mentally competent to do that. And if there's a diminished capacity or diminished competency, then that might be something that we have to explore later.
And then he really is in the fight for his life at this point because he's facing what could be a statutory max sentence of life in prison, even though he's not accused of pulling the trigger. And we'll talk about that more in a second. But I imagine as the defense is prepping for the trial, there's a lot of evidence that needs to be
Still,
sifted through,
it's the
gone
same.
through. The feds have been
You're
building this case for years,
as
so I'm
much the
sure it's going to take a
problem.
while to go through all the calls, the text message, videos, if that's in evidence. But what do you make of what could be an overwhelming amount of evidence spread across multiple defendants and not just little Durk? How difficult is that as a criminal defense attorney?
Sometimes it can be difficult, but I think, and this is always the approach that I take, it's my job to represent my client. And so I like to create a timeline and parse things apart that are specific and applicable to my client. We have to first look at the facts or the details of the case, and then place everyone's involvement where it belongs. Who is expected to be a witness? Who could ultimately testify against the client, and things of that nature, and what we can expect that testimony to be. So we've got to sift through all of that. Another thing is we hire our own and have our own investigators to do some of the work with and for us, because the government's always going to put forth what they believe proves their case beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's also our responsibility to do our own investigation and to gather evidence in favor of our client, and we will do that. And so it can be a lot. It can be very monotonous, tedious, and voluminous when it comes to dealing with these discovery issues, but it's not anything that a good set of attorneys.
I just think, like, in the end, like, after all that, never mind, never mind, never mind. What a stupid thought. It's just a stupid thought.
Can't handle. It's not anything that a great set of defense attorneys can accomplish, in the hopes of also getting a not guilty verdict at trial.
And as we talk about this case, I know some people have their own thoughts on Durk's alleged involvement. He's not accused of pulling the trigger, just pulling the strings, according to prosecutors. But
That's almost as that's still that's the same amount of guilt, and yeah, they got him dead to wrong, dead to right, to charge him with like it's almost as much damage. Sorry, can't find. I really can't find the word. But like, that's really, yeah.
in your opinion, Safa, do you think a jury will actually see it that way?
It's going to depend on what the evidence is and as it rolls in. And so while there may be a ton of evidence, and it's voluminous, the key here is that these pieces of evidence have to come in, or this evidence that they have has to come in appropriately at a trial. Just because there is something that is a piece of evidence, for example.
Without him, there wouldn't be no shooting. I mean, like, if he didn't give the order, there would be no. For him to give the order, without him giving the order, there would be no problem. So, yeah, he's definitely liable for that offense, and he needs to hold. He needs to be held accountable. That's why they started to charge people, like even the getaway driver outside of a bank robbery is still being charged with the same offense as the one who was in there, because without the getaway driver there would be no robbery. So like, you thinking just because you're the getaway driver you're getting charged with less? No, you're getting hit with the same. It's kind of unfair in some reasons, but like that's why they implemented, like, established the RICO, so they could cripple organizations and organized crime syndicates. And honestly, I get it because some of these need to be taken down, but the government isn't always as pure as they try to portray themselves. They're not as pure as they try seem to be.
that exist in discovery doesn't mean that it will come in at a trial. A proper foundation has to be laid with the proper witnesses. Ultimately, life happens, things happen. Sometimes the witnesses are not available by the time trial comes around, and those things we
Why?
often will use to our benefit if that is the case. And so, with respect to getting all of these things accomplished and completed, there's a lot that goes into it, but I'm sure that Mr. Durk's team is ultimately going to be well equipped to handle that moving forward.
And prosecutors say that they have multiple witnesses already prepared to testify. And I'm sure the most important witnesses that they'll probably put on the stand are the analysts who go through the texts, the calls, etc. But for those who are allegedly involved in this plot, do you see any of them taking the stand or maybe turning on each other, possibly even turning on Lil Durk?
That's always a possibility, and that's always something that we prepare for and preparing for the worst.
Nobody likes
There are a number of
nobody
co-defendants
likes being
involved in this
faced
case,
with
and that's always something
jail
that we
time.
have to look out for is the government trying to please certain people out and get cooperation from them on the eve of trial or as
It
the
will
case
happen.
prepares to
It
trial.
always
And so
happens.
that would not be surprising. I'm sure that those
It's not surprising, and it always happens. And then the next move is for the lawyer to make him look not as credible. It's a cat mouse game.
conversations probably have been had between the prosecution and some of the defense attorneys if the clients are willing to cooperate. As attorneys, we have to discuss that with our clients if it comes up, even if we don't think it's a good idea, and even if they don't want to do that. I think, again, with this case and the nature of it, can I see these actual co-defendants testifying? Likely not, but we'll see. It's going to be their choice.
And it'll be interesting because, again, the stakes are very, very high in this case. And prosecutors have even previously pushed for an anonymous jury. Do you think that's necessary in a case like this? Prosecutors have also previously said that Dirk's supporters have already made threats toward the judge and the prosecution.
I don't think it's necessary, but I understand why that is the case. When you do have certain elements where it's involving a murder charges or witness tampering, and it's a high stakes case to your point where he could likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Sometimes people are willing to go the extra mile, whether it's him because of his celebrity or his supporter.
It's his celebrity status. There's no sugarcoating it. He got hella fans. Gotta leave him that.
Or other individuals that are involved. And so, in the abundance of caution, I can understand why they would move to have an anonymous jury. I don't think that it's completely necessary, but I can understand certainly why they would consider that.
And you know, Safo, there are plenty of times we've seen indictments, we've seen what's laid out in paper and writing, and then once we get to trial, it just feels like a completely different case. It doesn't feel as strong as what was laid out in an indictment. But do you think that the prosecution's evidence is strong enough to convict by everything that we know right now?
I'm not quite sure. And the reason I say that is
That's a
because
dumb
it seems
question.
that this case, there's no
That's,
direct
I
evidence,
mean,
there's no smoking gun, but this seems to be more circumstantial. This is going to be pieced together with analytics by certain analysis.
it's
We're going
gonna,
to be looking at, are they white?
it will have the same ending as Young Thug, probably. He will get out. Even though I think like some of these guys don't deserve it, but he will get out. Or like maybe like yeah, 5 to 10 years with credit served, and then another 15 years on probation, stuff like that. But he will get out.
Transfers, purchasing of plane tickets, things like that that are more technical in nature that they're going to use to tie in and show that all of these things were done at Lil Durk's direction. But again, if the government can have the appropriate witnesses and line things up so it's in a digestible manner for the jury to hear and understand, and if it's enough to actually truly convict. An indictment is a piece of paper, it's an accusatory, it's not a conviction.
Circumstantial is
So the government
always
still has that heavy burden
fishy.
of proving each and every element of those offenses
There's
beyond a
so much
reasonable doubt.
stuff that
And it'll be
you can
interesting to
make it really
see
stick.
again because the trial is supposed to begin in just a few short months. But I'm curious, do you think it'll be
Short
difficult to
months.
even
That
seat a
boy is
jury
locked
in
up
this
in a
case?
shoe
Durk is a
till
well-known rapper.
April.
Obviously, this case it might be hard to seat a jury in this case if it were to happen in Chicago. But since this is a federal case, it's happening in Los Angeles. Do you think it'll be difficult for a jury to be seated?
I think it's still going to be difficult to seat a jury on this case because of the length of time that this trial might take. That's always a factor. People don't like sitting on juries, and the people that do like sitting on juries, usually we try to get rid of them. And not only that, but you do have individuals who may know information about this case that could have some sort of bias. They could think that Mr.
True.
Durk is a rapper and gang related, and they might be afraid to sit on this panel. There's a lot of other factors and questions that will be asked during voir dire where the attorneys and the judge will be able to sift out the jurors. But I do think that it's going to take quite a bit of time to get a jury on this case. Maybe not as long as the Diddy case or the Diddy trial, but I do think it's going to take some time to get there.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. Unfortunately, I wish that we could have cameras up in that courtroom, but again, it's a federal case, so unfortunately, cameras are not allowed. But I would love to be a fly on that wall or be a reporter in that courtroom just to get a piece of the action. Safa Robinson Ferrer, I want to thank you so, so much.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to find out. We're pretty early, so the comments won't tell us anything different. But we could try. Let's see. Yeah, it's never been this early. The attorney has access to visit or talk to him whenever she wants, so why hasn't she had a visit with him and he just talked? Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. Yeah, you make it work. It's not the perfect situation. Circumstances, sure, we get that. But still, he's in there for a reason, and you work around that. King One will never rest. Yeah, he maybe doesn't deserve it. Yeah, we'll see how that pans out. I'm gonna be covering that definitely. I always like trials, so we'll see us. Peace.